Welcome back to the show, The Unbroken. Sam Davis right here, your host, sitting in the new studio. First episode ever in the new studio. Pleased so far. We'll see how it rolls. Couldn't be more happy to have my guest today come all the way from Tucson, Arizona. Her name is Tiffany Giego. Family-run business, therapeutic boarding school called Inbalance out of Tucson, Arizona. She's here today to talk about what it's like running a therapeutic boarding school, what's going on with our youth today, and how a family ended up owning a therapeutic boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
You're the director of clinical
services.
Mm-hmm. At Inbalance Therapeutic Boarding School.
Yeah.
How'd that come to be? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's funny because, I grew up with a therapist for a dad, and so my number one goal in life was to be anything but a therapist.
Wow. What was so annoying about it?
Well, it's two parts. One, I'm a natural-born empath, and I just saw the weight of what my dad had to carry. And, growing up, he worked the overnight shifts at the juvenile courts and then went to school during the day. And so started out with the outpatient court-mandated kids. And so I would come home from college breaks, and he would say, I'm not going to give you money, but you can peer facilitate in our groups. And I started to fall in love with it, but I knew it was going to be hard to leave it at work. And so I got my bachelor's in special education, and I was going to be a teacher. And quickly learned after I graduated, it just wasn't for me. I couldn't work in a system where I couldn't impact change. And there was a lot of red tapes in schools. And so decided to go back to school and get my master's in social work. And then we spent a year planning the opening of Inbalance together and opened in 2004.
2004. So y'all are at this 21 years.
Yes.
Y'all have been doing this. Now, I've got to ask, and I'm sure people want to know, what would draw your father to become a therapist? And you want to share a little bit about what happened to get to that point to where you all are in this space of mental health, emotional health?
Yeah, it's really where miracles started to unfold in retrospect, because it shouldn't have worked. My dad was one of 5 and my mom was one of 6. They've been best friends since first grade. My dad was a rebel in school. The teachers just wanted him out. He ran away when he was 16 to go be an extra in movies and live in California and had a lot of trauma. What he found out later is he was dyslexic. And so his whole life, people kept saying, you're dumb, you're lazy, you're not trying hard enough. And so he decided he was dumb and he was lazy and he wasn't trying hard enough.
He allowed the power of the word to influence him and create some belief systems about himself that just weren't so.
And I think that happens so often with kids, especially with boys. A lot of times it's like they try, and they're not going to say, you know what, I tried and I don't understand. So they're going to say, I tried and now I don't care about it. Now it's not important. It doesn't matter. Who needs school? Because they're just so misunderstood. I think anger and apathy are still the emotions that are acceptable for young boys to express. And so he went through he rode bulls in the rodeo, and he was just doing everything he could to escape what was real in his life. Hid the trauma behind adrenaline-seeking stuff, and then it's like, I'm going to be a dad. I have to get my shit together.
Mm-hmm. My son has dyslexia.
Really?
We actually moved over into the city for him to go to a school that was designed to help kids and students with dyslexia, and it changed his life.
See, and that's amazing.
Gave him confidence, gave him some self-esteem, because he just hated school. He hated it, and I couldn't blame him. I went to the school for Parents' Day for them, and part of the exercises that they were doing was to show us what it was like to have dyslexia, and they had a mirror on the book, and you had to try and read the book through the mirror.
I love that.
And it was tough.
It was tough.
Yeah.
And
it was
especially
impossible,
when
actually.
You don't know you have it. And back then, it was, you try harder and you push your way through. And he tried that and just was misunderstood by everybody. His family, his teachers,
And it killed his confidence probably
Mhm.
in school, watching other kids be able to read and do this. And he's just trying so hard just to even process what he's reading that he can't because he's trying so hard to just get the words out.
Yeah.
Just to read the words.
Yeah. It just felt like everybody else had something figured out that he didn't. And that was really part of once, he started working with kids in the court system, he realized a lot of them were like that. A lot of them were just told who they were when they were young and then lived out that. And so the idea of treatment for kids was create a space where that never happens to another kid. He believes and has passed that down. There's a genius inside of all of us. If there's only one person that can see it and pull it out of us. And so he became really determined to be that one person. Kids that had grown up with trauma that had gone on to repeat the cycle, and kids that, were resilient, broke the cycle. There were a lot of factors, personality, but the number one thing was that they had at least one adult in their lives that really saw them and that could change the trajectory of everything. I think kids are buried under more layers today than they've ever been. They're harder to figure out. It's not so readily open. I love that learning disabilities are getting tested for earlier on. That makes school easier because once a kid hates school, when you're school age, if you're not into school, who are you? That's what all the other kids are doing. So you've just become really bad at school.
Yeah.
That becomes your sense of belonging. And so it's reaching kids early enough to say, no, you're not dumb. You learn different. This is how you learn. Let's teach you.
So when you say all of us there at y'all's school,
yeah,
who is all of us in the family that's running this ship?
So it was, my mom and dad opened intensive outpatient in 1996 and saw more kids overdosing and dying and realized that wasn't enough. So we started planning the opening. We were originally going to open in Sonoyta. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sonoyta, Arizona. We were naive. We were heart-led. My parents are very heart-led. We were not business minded. It's just kind of create this space. So we found a place. We had to host like this town pizza party. We all show up. We bring my little grandma, and the entire town showed up and said, literally, as soon as we started talking, you guys can't come here. Your boys will rape our daughters and steal our things. And if we find them on our property, we'll shoot first and ask second. And it was terrifying. We had to like sneak my grandma out of the back door and there's just something that...
Oh, they showed up with pitchforks and,
yes,
and torches.
Literally saying...
You were like, oh, the community's showing up.
We bought them pizza and ice cream.
Want some pizza? Want some ice cream?
We were so naive about it.
And they're like, nah, we want to kill you.
Yeah.
Right.
They literally said, we'll shoot first and ask second because they don't want a bunch of drug addicts to move into their town. And so they hired like a lawyer to block it, but we were like, this isn't the space, this isn't where this is meant to happen. And so we kept looking. We found the perfect property. It was God's timing. And so I worked there from the beginning. My parents, my husband, we lived there before the boys did. We lived there with the first 4 boys that ever lived there. My brother was going to be in the FBI, and my younger brother was going to do something different. And they saw the power of change, and they both said, this is what we want to do. So now there's 3 of us total. We all 3 work there.
I worked in a family business, generational family business before I sobered up. I was actually the generation that burnt the business to the ground due to cocaine addiction, opiates, and just, overall just unmanageability of my life.
Yeah.
But I can remember even as a child sitting around the Sunday supper table because, where I'm from, everybody with the family would gather and eat Sunday dinner together. And it was just all conversation around the business.
Yeah.
And then when I went into it, my family was in it. It was all family running it. We never had a dinner where we were talking about other things other than work. It was like it was really hard to separate the two.
Yeah.
Is that like that with you all?
It's funny because people ask us all the time, do you guys genuinely like each other as much as you guys present? And we genuinely do. And so we all go play pickleball together, and all of us live within a 10-mile radius, and we get together probably 2 or 3 times a week. Now that we have kids, it's broken that up. We don't talk about work when we're together. We play with our kids and we play pickleball, and but the other good thing about it is it's a different kind of business where when we're talking about it, it's because we care about it. It's like, did you hear that this kid is doing amazing? This kid needs help. Can you give him a call? So it's not like the stressful sit around the table and talk about it. We still, 21 years later, just have a passion for it. My dad is trying to retire. I don't think he'll ever retire. He just loves it. And so he's still on the periphery of it. And it feels good to come home and the people you're closest to get it. It's hard work.
What's going on in a kid's life when they end up at a therapeutic boarding school? Paint a picture of a typical family dynamic of a young man or young woman that ends up in a therapeutic boarding school.
It's a great question because it's changed so much for a couple of reasons. I think that, you know, I think so COVID came along right when kids were entering. Now the kids that we treat, because we treat ages 13 to 17 in our therapeutic boarding school. And then we have transitional living programs for young adults. But, COVID came along during junior high, which is terrible. You couldn't pay me $1 million to go to junior high again. My youngest just barely survived it. But if you think about what happens for you during junior high, that's where you develop social resiliency. It's where things go from like play dates to more complicated friendships. You switch teachers, you get organized, your executive functioning skills grow, and you're supposed to be moving away from your family and finding a sense of identity and belonging. And this generation, those kids were at home. And so they didn't get any of that. And they weren't individuating from their families. Their families were their principal and their counselor and their teacher. And then the world picks back up and they're dropped off on a high school campus. And it's like, okay, pick up where we left off. And so they feel lost. There was a kid in my office the other day. He's so wise, but he said, felt like everybody else was walking around with a user manual that I didn't get. And I just wanted to say, can I borrow your user manual? Can I peek at your user manual? Because I felt like everybody else knew how to do this and I didn't know how to do this. And none of the kids knew how to do this. So to be walking around in a 16-year-old's body with the world having the expectations of you, of a 16-year-old, but you have the developmental functioning of a, 13 or 14-year-old, you just feel broken. Like everybody else has it figured out and you don't. So that part has really changed. By the time that the guys were all boys, they get to us, school's gotten really hard. They've been kicked out of school. Their parents have, tried everything. They've tried outpatient. A lot of them have tried short-term programs. Kids come back home and they were using 2 days later. They've tried everything, and that period of COVID was traumatic for the parents too. And so the parents have been, by the time a kid lands with us, parents have been through it. It's been scary. It ranges from kids had just started in their drug use, but really struggled, couldn't leave their room. During COVID, they all developed these online personas. That's where they lived, school was online, socialization. And then they transitioned back and they tried to transition that online persona into real life, and that didn't work. So I just think a kid shows up to us and they have no idea who they are, and the parents have no idea.
But through history, I mean, there has been similar things to COVID. I'm a student of history.
Yeah.
I have a family cemetery. Our family's been in the same area for a couple hundred years. every family cemetery that I experience, that I see, which I'm not out looking at a bunch of family cemeteries, but you go to any family cemetery or any cemetery back in the day, you talking about the Spanish flu. I mean, we've got a
Yeah.
couple of little kids buried in our family cemetery that didn't make it.
Yeah.
Families that didn't make it. I
Yeah.
mean, in the woods where I roam, you'll find abandoned homes, and in a little town history, you'll see that they were a family of sharecroppers, and the Spanish flu came through and wiped them out. It was wiping people out.
Yeah.
Yet they survived.
Yeah.
Like, what was, not that the trauma wasn't there. We're probably paying for some of the traumatic events from way back then.
Yeah.
What's the difference? What was it about? Was it the unknown of the virus and what it may do? Was it the hype being pushed? Was it the panic of the families? What was it?
Such a good question, and I've studied it because it's just so fascinating to me. But I think it's all of that. I think kids are growing up today in a world that's divided, with tension that's everywhere. People had different belief systems about COVID. Kids absorbed all of that. People were scared. They responded in different ways. I know kids that didn't leave their house for 2 years because people were so afraid.
But where did that come from? To not leave the home for 2 years. Where's that coming from?
It's how parents process it. So parents were scared. My kids, I had kids at the same time that were the same age. I had kids whose parents were in the medical field that were coming home from hospitals and terrified they were going to bring things home to their kids and their kids were going to spread it to other people. I feel like everybody was trying to figure shit out. Teachers all of a sudden had to teach remotely. They didn't know how to do that. We didn't know what we were doing. We had to, every week we're like, had a meeting where we had to make decisions about the program and testing and staff. And so I just think it was a whole world that was trying to figure it out as they went. So it was survival.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're living the after effects of what that means. So when kids grow up, during that time and everybody's wearing masks and now they don't know how to read, facial expressions and read people. We have higher rates of ASD diagnosis than we've ever had.
For the folks, what is ASD?
Oh, it's autism spectrum disorder. So, and I think what we're going to find is a big part of that is because that part of their brain just didn't get to develop, where you're learning how to read people. And in junior high and middle school, you're learning the boundaries of what am I doing that pisses people off? What am I doing that annoys people? How do I draw people towards me? So you just have this whole generation of kids that just didn't know where they belonged.
When this kicked off, I was in New York on an intervention, and I started to notice, this is before it really, you'd hear a little whisper, here and there. It was just starting to get cranked up a little bit. And I was in New York for an intervention and started seeing people in the airport with masks on. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then went from there to Florida. When I left my home to go to Florida, everything was good. My kids were in school. Things were great. I mean, it was just kind of, life is normal. And while I was in Florida, it really hit the fan and they started shutting everything down. And I got home and school was closed.
Yeah.
So my reaction was, all right, we're virtual. And I had so much compassion for my 8th grader at the time.
Yeah.
Because he was in 8th grade when it's all hit.
Mine too.
And I'm listening to the teachers give the instruction over the computer when this kid's sitting in the kitchen, and it sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. I've had to take some trainings virtually, and I almost lost my mind. There was no way that I could. But like that whole year was a wash.
Yeah,
was a wash. Now we're in a rural area. We weren't isolated in the home. My freak out is I just went and got a bunch of food.
Yeah.
And, made sure everything was good to go. Yeah, we were good to go, and we were set up for whatever came down the pike, but they weren't isolated at the home. But there was such an unknown. I do remember him wanting to go out and play with his friends out at the football field over at the playground at the school. And I was thinking, I was like, well, are their parents okay with this? Or is this there was a lot of unknowns, but I'm grateful that he got out and was able to mingle with his friends and be outside. But it took a toll in the next school year. They didn't know how to interact.
Mm-mm.
And now, like even last year, the bell rings. They get out of school. They're walking down the hall. They're not interacting.
And that's the thing is and the good news about there's good news to it, but because I go to these conferences and I hear people talk about like, I think we're all tired of hearing about COVID and social media and how it affects kids' brains. But this is part I just feel like people haven't recognized is developmentally an entire generation of kids missed a whole lot of stuff. But I think the good news is once we're aware of that, we can go, their brains are still have the neuroplasticity where we can go back. And that's what we, aim to create is like a place where they can find out who they are and redevelop their self-confidence and their sense of belonging and all these things that their brains weren't wired to sit in front of a computer and learn. Like no matter who the teacher was, their brains developmentally didn't have that capability, but that's how they were forced to learn. So you have this whole generation of kids that came out of it hating school. Their sports got shut down. The things that gave them any sense of purpose or meaning were gone. And they didn't, know where to pick up. And so it was like we just kept moving. And we didn't stop and say, wait, like what do these kids need? Now we have, even on college campuses, there's kids that they can't leave their dorm room. Their social anxiety is so high. They don't know how to just go out and meet people and interact. And I get that. I'm naturally introverted. These things are scary for me. So I think for our introverted, sensitive, particularly boys, they just don't know what to do with that. And so it's going back and saying, it's okay. We had this shared trauma. This is a shared trauma that people experienced across the world. I think that was a positive thing. We all have some empathy. We all lived it, right? We all have different experiences. I have a niece that was really young when this all happened. And so most of her formative memories were masks and all these things. And we were at the hospital when her little brother was born and the doctor came in and put hand sanitizer on. And she was like, no, I don't like that smell. I don't like that smell. And it brought back all of this stuff for her. So I do think it's something that if it goes unchecked, the next 10 years, 20 years, we're going to see where the gap was and what happened. And if kids don't understand why they feel lost and why they didn't have the user's manual, why they think that. And parents, same thing. Like they didn't have support. I was trying to work full time and still make sure that my kids could learn on a computer. I haven't been able to help with their math since second grade.
Right.
That is not my forte. I had a ton of empathy for the teachers. How do you control a bunch of fifth graders over a computer screen? How do you hold their attention? So there were beautiful things. I think the world we were trying to figure it out collectively and people jumped in. You saw the helpers, right? If I were a teacher, I would have been like, I'm out. I think everything got hard and the people that knew how to do hard things stepped up, but it's just not over.
What is the most difficult thing that you have to encounter or that you encounter when you have an adolescent, teenager coming into a boarding school with behavioral problems, with some trauma, substance abuse, and you've got a terrified family that has been unknowingly enabling it, terrified that they're at this place in their life where they have to actually send their loved one off. And then they're blaming themselves for part of it, or a lot of it, or most of it. Like, what's the most common encounter, the most difficult encounters that you're having around that? Like, what's that look like?
So it's two parts. There's a macro thing that's really hard, that's new, and then there's the specific kids we work with. So the specific guys we work with, it's that they're landing on campus and they don't have any trust and they shouldn't. That would be a weird way to enter a new environment, right? Is just to be trusting and be accepting of where you're at.
Are some of those kids getting there through interventions? Is it your typical, how much of that are you seeing because the word intervention, a lot of people are afraid of that. And they'll associate the word intervention with what they've experienced or what they've heard of, what they've seen, Couple of guys busting in the door at 3 a.m., grabbing a teenager out of bed, putting some flip flops on him and some handcuffs, and sending him out the door.
Right.
That
Right.
that's tough.
That's tough.
I don't do those interventions.
Yeah.
I don't work with adolescents. But to me, that just I can see where families would be. Or is there a lot of that still going on?
There's not as much, but for me, if I'm worried my kid is going to bolt out of the window and overdose again, like it happens when it's dire and it's necessary and it's life threatening. It is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially if a kid knows he's going to treatment and he can run away, the chances of him overdosing during that time, like, oh, I'm just going to use as much as I can before I get sent to treatment.
Yeah. I mean, his behavior has invited that process into his life, right? So I'm not, oh, poor him. It's like I'm about accountability, and you have to have the experience that you have to have. I was wondering, like, how do you feel about those type? You're about what it sounds like is that, hey, it's either that or they're going to go out there and die.
In the life or death situations, I think parents don't often have a choice. But I think a lot of the times, the interventions that come in and just help, this is where we're at. You're going to be okay, and we're going to ride there with you. And we know this program, and we know there's good people. Kids do better when they're not, my kids act differently around other people than they do around me. So when it's somebody that shows up that's unfamiliar to them, I feel like it goes better. And most of the time, it's not the handcuffs in the 3 a.m. It's like, we've talked. This is where you're going. Here's who you're going with. And by the time they get to us, they're fist bumping and, hey, are we going to talk again? With the interventionists and the transporters. And so
it's becoming more and more of your traditional style of intervention of what we're seeing today.
Yes. So, and that's the preferred method for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my husband had cancer, and it was like, I remember when I'm giving him the chemo pills that I'm not allowed to touch with my bare hands because they're so poisonous, and he had to swallow them. And I'm watching him get gray and sick, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is killing him. And I was like, no, the cancer is killing him. This is what's saving his life. So to get to the point where
it didn't look pretty at the time.
And it didn't look pretty. But it's like, you have to do what you have to do to save your kid's life.
Exactly.
And it's terrifying, and I have so much empathy for the parents and the kids, but that goes to the macro level of things. Is I think there's, kind of been this shift towards a mistrust in institutions in general. I think people don't know who to trust. And then there's been, this wave against treatment and programs and mistrust of that. And some of it's warranted. I'm here to say that there were programs that, way back in the day that did not do it right. So it's warranted. I think anything where you're entrusting your kids to the care of other people deserves close inspection and trust. That'd be the scariest thing ever. But I think that it's showing that, we don't believe in the break them down to build them up model at all. I just think that's a failed experiment. These kids have been broken down.
They're coming to you broken.
Yeah. Our job is to build them up, is to help them find themselves. And that is when a kid lands and he's not going to trust me right away, and he shouldn't. He doesn't know me. He's going to trust his friends he makes. He's going to trust the horse that, we have kids, it's funny, that come from the East Coast that are like, I hate horses. I'm never going near a horse. And they leave like belt buckled, Carhartt, cowboy boots. They just find themselves in that. They we're full riding, so they become real cowboys. And some don't, and we have a music recording studio. And I just think the first thing they're going to do is find something that's not drugs that gives them a tiny taste of that. I feel okay for a minute, whether it's on the basketball court or it's in the art studio, wherever that is, that's what's going to happen first. And then they're going to make friends, and then they'll start to trust the adults, and then they'll show it to their parents.
So when a kid comes to you, and let's say he's he's not happy to be there. I don't know how many people would be happy to be there when
No,
they
that'd
first
be
show
weird.
up.
If they were doing cartwheels coming down the driveway, I would be worried about them.
Is there an adjustment period that is
Mhm.
needed between the child before they interact with the parents?
Yeah, we usually give it a couple of weeks. Give the parents time to catch their breath and get to know us.
There's
Parents
there
have,
a lot of hand holding with the parents during that time,
yeah,
right? Daily updates or every other
yes.
day updates of, hey, this is what he's doing. This
And
is
I
what
would
he's
want that. It's the weird little
absolutely.
things. Like,
Yeah.
I remember dropping my daughter off at a dance camp and I wanted to know, did she look happy or
Mm.
did she look sad? Like, what did her face look like? I was really obsessed with that. Like, I knew if I could just like see a picture of her, I would know if she was okay or not. And I wasn't sending her away in the middle of her trauma and my trauma. So, yeah, it's getting the parents to say he's okay, he's interacting. I saw him outside laughing on the basketball court while I was walking over here. I do think that's the benefit of family owned and operated is we're invested. I get to know these kids, I get to know these families. Whereas the other day I'm in a meeting and I get a text message from a kid and that was here 10 years ago. And he says, "Hey Tiffany, I need help." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? Hold on, let me step out of this meeting." And he goes, "Oh, no, no, it's fine. It's just I just got a new crock pot because I want to start meal planning, but I don't know how to use it. I wanted you to FaceTime me and show me how." So we get to see them all the way through to
Mhm.
having kids and families. And we have 2 therapists now that are master's level social workers that are working for us that went through our program.
So what? Oh, that's impressive. They went through your program now
Mm-hmm.
that they're working,
Yeah. Our
educated.
program director was a student at the ranch, and he's been with us for 17 years. He's married, he has 2 kids. I helped plan his wedding. Um,
What's the youngest that you're seeing coming in the door? What's the youngest you all take? But I mean, throughout, what age range are you seeing?
so the youngest we take is 13. They have to have started high school, but I get calls all the time for 10, 11, 12 years old, and we don't take kids that young. So there's other programs that do, but
As a result of their behavior, their addictions,
hmm
or
yeah, and mental health has become a big, thing. It's not even just like people say, "Do you treat mental health and substance abuse?" And I'm like, I've never treated somebody that just had substance abuse. Like that's a symptom,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's the trauma. I think we, really equally specialize in trauma, mental health, and substance abuse because the three are usually very tied together. You
yeah,
can't treat one without the other.
yeah. The addiction is just the result of the problem.
Right.
The human condition, emotional health, mental health, whatever. There's sometimes it manifests, and I say this all the time. Like sometimes it manifests into gambling, sex addiction, toxic relationships, workaholics, body image, eating
Yeah.
disorder, or addiction. It's just all just different branches of the same tree.
And the thing parents always ask, like, for the kids that have gotten out and done well, what's the common factor? And that's a word you use a lot, and I like it because it's important. It's that they've increased their resiliency threshold. So if I get a headache every day and I take ibuprofen every day and that works for me, I'm not going to stop and be like, "Oh, why am I getting a headache? Do I need
Mm,
to, am I drinking enough water?" These kids found something that when they felt scared or sad or bored or lonely or, they found something that took that away. And so if they started using when they were 13 or 11, now they don't know how to be scared. And they don't know how to be sad and they don't know how to be lonely because the only thing that they use to cope with it is gone. So that's part of why there's been a lot of pressure. We're long-term treatment to go shorter. Um, but for me, it's like it takes time. It takes time for them to rewire, to learn how to cope, to increase their resiliency threshold, to grow and to learn and find their confidence in themselves. It's all layered. It doesn't all happen at once. First, they have to trust us, then they have to trust themselves, and they have to trust their family. So we do a lot of work with the family, a lot of work. If a kid comes through our program and they've changed, but the family hasn't made any changes, then they go back into the same environment, and that doesn't work.
I mean, if you're not dealing with your family in this day and age, I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Because if you just take it in, and there's still plenty of programs, unfortunately, that just take a person in and the family's left in the dark. There's a
yeah,
plenty of that,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
But if you're doing that, you're only working on maybe 25% of the problem.
And
I'll
that's,
say half, but oftentimes the family is harder to deal with than the addicted individual.
yeah, because it's passed down and they're doing the best. They're bringing their family of origin stuff through unknowingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think that's where treatment gets lumped together. And this happens in the adult treatment world, and it happens, and if you've seen it, I've heard people talk about it. There's like the short term stabilization, save your life, get you okay. Get you standing on your feet, get you okay. That's not treatment. That's stabilization. That's necessary. But then there's the added layer of, okay, now what? Now what do I do with my life? What does this mean for me? They call addiction a disease of failed intentions. And I see that all the time. People will intend, they go, short term, they intend to stay sober. They want to stay sober. They tell everybody they're going to stay sober. But they get out and it's like, somebody that's had both their legs shattered and they intend to get up and walk. Well, you have to rebuild your legs before you can walk. So we have a lot of what kids will say are treatment failures by the time they get to us. And you have to recharacterize that. It's not a failure. You didn't fail. You just didn't have the equipment. You weren't prepared yet. So it's getting them to trust themselves and believe that this is possible.
To be a parent and have a 12-year-old, 11-year-old to the point that like there's serious substance abuse issues and behavioral issues. I was thinking, back in my day, I don't know about yours, but back in my day, we rode around. We went out. We went to proms. We went to homecomings. Never at home. We weren't, I was in my bedroom a lot when I was at home, but I was rarely at home. We were out doing, mingling, interacting, engaged in stuff, not always good stuff, but we were out.
It's true.
And when we acted out, we usually got caught because we were out with others.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I've seen kids back in my day, the day I turned 16, I was up getting a driver's license.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't wait. It was like freedom.
Yeah.
I've seen kids now, 16, 17, no driver's license and no interest in getting one.
No interest. They've lost, and that's the thing. That's where the hopelessness sets in, right? They've lost the ability to have goals. And I think that's the part of their brain that was short-circuited. They can't see past today right now, and today right now looks pretty bleak and hopeless for them. I've seen kids that have, overdosed, been Narcan back twice, and still, out using, because it's not willpower. You know that. You don't wake up one morning and just decide, I don't like using anymore. I don't think I'll do that anymore. Right. Once your brain's been wired towards addiction. We also utilize the 12-step model. I just believe in it.
So along with the education, you're doing 12-step immersion, like they're working all 12 steps.
Yes.
How in the world do you introduce a 14 or 15-year-old to the concept that they're going to need a power greater than themselves to recreate their life? How tough is that?
That is tough. And that a lot of, it's funny because a lot of parents are afraid because there's still a misconception of the 12 steps, right? And some people will say 12-step recovery doesn't work for adolescents. And 21 years, it works, And for me, it's everything is about how does this apply to your life outside of here? That's the goal for everybody. You're living this big, happy, joyful, successful life. I think we live in a world that still doesn't facilitate, sobriety or recovery for young people. They just don't. It's like people still have this idea, kids go through it. They use, it's a phase, especially now that the legalization of marijuana. We've seen more drug-induced psychosis in the past 2 years than we've ever seen.
Yeah. More anxiety.
Yeah, more anxiety. And luckily now more research, hopefully now that they can research it. But, we do an international trip once a year, and we've done South Africa, Nepal, Peru. And one of the most powerful things was they went to South Africa and they found a meeting in South Africa. It wasn't in English. All the mamas were there and they sang and the kids really realized anywhere in the world I go, I know where to walk in and find people when I'm struggling and I'm having a hard time. And for me, that's the most important aspect, the fellowship, right? So when they come in, it's like they do struggle with the higher power part. One kid the other day was saying, "My higher power is the moon." Okay, great. That's your higher power. That's where you're starting from. We have a lot of people that work for us that are in recovery that are alumni of the program, and what they have to say is more important than what I have to say. They have more of an impact on the kids than I do a lot of the times because they get to share. 5 years ago, I was sitting where you were sitting, and look at my life now. So, it's the whole question of if a kid isn't showing up and saying, "I'm an addict and I'm ready for to do the work," can 12 steps work for them? Absolutely. They go to meetings. Doesn't matter. There's this guy that I know, you probably know too, but I heard him speak and he said, "I went to my first meeting because there was a really pretty girl I liked and I thought it would trick her into thinking I had my shit together. And so I started going to meetings. Was still using, but I went to meetings because I really wanted to impress her. And I sat in one and I heard something that changed my life and I wanted more of that." So if all they're getting is exposure, that's great. When they, at some point in their life, if they decide that they need it, they know where to find it. They know what rooms to walk into. I had a kid the other day that said, "I've never walked into a room that was so happy to see me in that room where I didn't have to earn that." And I love that part of the fellowship.
Mhm.
It's like the newcomer is the most important person in the room.
And a lot of people confuse the 12 steps with the fellowship.
Yeah.
The 12 steps are as pure as the driven snow,
Yeah.
old as man itself.
And they're pretty
They're just a
logical.
set of principles
Yeah.
that is already inside of us. Every man, woman, and child, those principles are there. They
Yeah.
just get out of whack. So the 12-step process just realigns that stuff.
And that
But there's some
everybody.
stuff with the fellowship that can get toxic,
Yeah.
right?
It's true.
But that's with anything.
Anything. And there's, Tucson, luckily, because we've been feeding into it for so long, has an amazing young people's recovery community. Amazing. They have a young people's meeting, 60 or 70 people that show up. We have a meeting on the campus at the University of Arizona. So they're finding other young people. That's what they're social beings.
Mm-hmm.
So what their brain says is the most important thing, above all, above family, above all, is that they belong somewhere. So when they get out of treatment, they've been successful, where do they belong? It's not with their friends that they were using with. It's where do they start? Well, there was a kid that left and he's like, "I went to 3 meetings a day when I left. Not because I needed the meetings. I needed to hurry and meet people. I needed to find my people."
Yeah, find the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, young people in recovery, these organizations are just, they're huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I sobered up in 2009. And, 2010, 2011, I remember conferences of young people in AA and just all over the country and all over the world.
Yeah. And that's what we take them to conferences. And that's where we hook a lot of kids. They're having fun. They're laughing. Their life is full. I think they picture getting sober when you're young means sitting on a couch in between your mom and dad every Friday night for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that's not.
It's about freedom.
We have a sober living that we bought that was a fraternity that was by the University of Arizona. And there's a kid, he has his DJ equipment and he brings it out and they swim and they do stupid stuff that, they jumped off the roof into a pool. They do stupid stuff. Well, guess what? That means that they're living like their normal, adolescence. Kids do stupid stuff. That's okay. That's what the big book says. We can take our recovery anywhere with us that we go. So it's really teaching them. I think they come in and there's this grief to having to be sober. They have to grieve that loss. But then by the end, it's like, I get to be sober. I heard one of the guys saying that one of the greatest gifts was his alcoholism, the gene. I love that. Like, if there were no addiction, there were no alcoholism, there would be no people in recovery. And who would be in the ditches?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
who would be pulling people out? So I love that part. I want the kids to experience that.
Let's get in the weeds a little bit on something. We were talking about the impact of COVID on today's youth. And if it were to happen again, what would be done differently? What do you think could have been done differently, if anything at all?
I don't think anything could have been because we didn't know. So I have empathy for everybody. I think we all did the best we could. In retrospect, it would be knowing what they were missing and going back. If kids had to repeat a grade, if they had to do something again, But teaching to their brains. We were teaching to brains that couldn't absorb the information and then getting upset that they didn't know the things they didn't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I talk to the kids all the time about having grace for themselves and grace for others. I believe we're all doing the best we can with what we have. I tell parents that all the time that want to blame themselves. We did the best we could, and you do better when you know better. So I just wish there was more focus on mental health during that time. I just think that it was again survival. We'll get through this. I think we all thought it would be short. So it
Mm-hmm.
was
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
yes,
2 weeks. All
it
we need
was
is 2 weeks.
it'd be short and then it's not short. And so I think instead of, schools already have so much put on them, but I've gone into so many schools in Tucson and said, let me bring in a team of counselors for free. And let me develop a curriculum to teach people, middle school, junior high, freshmen about depression, about anxiety, about how to recognize it, about substance abuse, about how, and they'll be like, oh, thank you, but no, thank you. Because I think then they're like, well, then I have this whole other thing I have to deal with, and we're just trying to get them through school with a lot of kids that don't like school or know how to do it. So I just wish then, I wish now, doing everything I can to bring it to every corner I can, is teach kids, no, you're not broken. What you're feeling is actually treatable. It's called depression. It's called social anxiety. Like there's things you can do about it. But boys, they don't say those things. They just get mad or
They shut down.
or shut down. And those are my favorite ones. When you say the kids that land on campus that are scared and they don't trust you, it's like, it's my job to earn their trust. It's like, they shouldn't trust me. They don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see that light come back on in their eyes and you know that they trust you, 21 years later, that's like what balances out the hard parts. And there are hard parts. It's harder today than it's ever been.
What's the problem with the public school system today? I mean, I know we could do a whole episode on that, but I mean that's a broad question, I know, but it's got a lot of answers. But what is going on? I mean, I'm hearing teachers that are just ready to quit.
Yeah.
The parents aren't parenting.
Mm-mm.
There's no control. There's no structure. There's no willingness. There's no want, it seems. The news that's being reported to me. Where does 8th place trophies come into this mix, into this recipe? Like what is happening?
This is what I think. There's a lot of layers, but I think it boils down to a couple of things. Is that there's this whole zero tolerance thing now, right? And part of it's necessary, where kids are just moved on. Let's stop and look at what's the why behind the behavior. The parents aren't doing it. The school's not doing it. And so kids are just passed on. I know kids that have been in 4 schools in 2 years because they're just passed on. But, the school is understaffed. And I think we live in a society where aggression is much more acceptable. So parents can go in and ream a teacher and yell at a principal and call and yell at me. And that's just how society, that's much more
fear.
acceptable.
It's all fear.
Yeah, it's all
anger
fear.
is the bodyguard of fear.
That's exactly.
That's all they're doing. They're terrified.
And what do teachers get out of that? Like they have they hold a kid accountable and then they're getting yelled at. And I just think there's so many layers to it that we're losing really good educators because their passion for it. And again, you pop those kids back into school. They don't know what they're doing. So they're pissed. They don't want to be there, and so the teachers that are still in it, that still have passion for it, are the most amazing. My kids have had great teachers. They're in public schools. All 3 of my kids have gone through public schools. It's the teachers that get the credit. So, it's going to have to come back around where schools are going to have to develop better systems to reach the kids and see this is a mental health crisis. This isn't a kid that's pissed and that he's angry. All the school shootings that happened, most of them, they had no history of violence. It was just all of these people that didn't see the brokenness that was inside. I feel sad about that for both parties. But it's just when you have a classroom of 40 kids, you don't have time to sit and be like, What's wrong? You seem really depressed. Some schools have one school counselor that they
Yeah.
share between 4 schools.
Yeah, that was us.
And most of the time, it's really about college advising, and it's not about come talk to me if you're getting bullied or you're depressed or. And that's the other thing. The bullying, when we were in school, right? Kids get bullied at school. You go home, you're done with it, you feel safe. Doesn't end for kids. Social media follows them. They're bullied 24 hours a day. I get to see that firsthand, which is terrible. So I think kids are dealing with more than they ever have. Teachers are dealing with more. Parents are dealing with more. I just think for me, the answer is connection. You find like-minded people that have the same struggles with you, and you realize it's not a me problem; it's a we problem.
There is a difference, like when I got bullied in school. I think everybody got bullied in school to some degree, and I could come home and I could escape out in the woods by myself, and I did that. I like to be alone because I didn't have to worry about anything, and I could be whoever I wanted to be when I was in my imagination in the woods.
Yep.
And today, still get the bullying in school.
You have this picture if you're getting bullied, you're getting like shoved into lockers. It's not. It's social media campaigns about you.
Yeah.
It's people, spreading false rumors about you.
Yep.
They get mad at a teacher. They do that to the teachers.
Yeah.
So it's
trying to cancel. So they're coming home from school and they can't escape it, or they're not escaping it,
and they're not talking about it. And that's the biggest thing. And as a parent, I get it. How was your day? Good. I would ask my son, anything exciting? No. Well, I heard a helicopter made an emergency landing on your guys' playground today. That wasn't exciting. Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
My daughters come home 45 minutes later. I know what color shoes everybody was wearing. And, girls, it's different. But boys, I think they just have learned to internalize and shove things down until they can't anymore.
What's the average GPA of the students at y'all's place now?
That's a good question. It's low when they come in. And I think and that's the good thing about our school. So individualized. We can have kids that have learning disabilities and need a lot of support. And we've had kids go to Ivy League schools when they get out. So it works well, to both. I think it's built around the concept of focus and brain development and ADD. They're never sitting at their desk for longer than an hour. They go outside, they do PE, they come back in, they do school, they go outside, they do equine, they come back in. Again, I think school's set up for brains that haven't developed the ability to sit and focus for 7 hours a day.
Jordan Peterson says that boys were not meant to be in the school system the way that we have it right now. They are not built for that.
No. And then we make it their fault.
Yeah.
They can't sit still in their seat and they can't learn and they're not absorbing the information. And when your, body is in survival mode, your memory is not functioning. And a lot of kids, their body is in survival mode from the second they step foot into school till when they leave.
Yeah.
So, I think school is a balance of it can't be a bubble because hopefully they're going to go on and, some of them want to keep doing school. We have maintenance as one of the school credits. They're learning welding. They're learning to build these beautiful carpentry projects. Some kids, that's what they want to do. We have culinary apprenticeship. They're learning how to run a commercial kitchen. So not every kid, and parents have shifted on that. I think before the goal was college, college, college. Now parents are like, just want them to live and be healthy and happy. So, it's something for everybody. It's not cookie cutter. Anything that's cookie cutter for kids, automatic failure.
Yeah.
There's no kids that are the same, and public school is very cookie cutter.
Please tell me your students are leaving that school understanding how to balance a checkbook.
We do.
Please tell me your students are leaving your school with a little understanding about how government works.
Yes.
With a little bit of understanding about what investment looks like.
Yes.
A little bit of understanding that you can go out here and create your own world.
And that's the best part is they get to choose what they want to learn about. I didn't get that choice, when I was in school. And so a lot of the electives are that. It's like learning financial literacy. They're teaching me. And the kid was like, I want to do this investment portfolio. And I'm like, okay, can I take notes? Because I probably need to learn some more about this too. But, and they get a responsibility in teaching subjects and learning how to teach and be of service and give things away. I mean, that's The number one thing is, how do you rebuild a fractured self-esteem? It's through doing esteemable acts.
Exactly.
And I think that's where recovery really catches fire. I stopped feeling like this piece of garbage, and now I feel like I have this purpose and I'm giving back. It's like every little piece of shame gets traded out for pride. And that's where you see people start, I
That's so
just,
closely connected to, you can't act your way, you can't think your way into right action. You have to act your way into right thinking, and that's how it happens. Is that you gain self esteem by doing esteemable things, and the more self esteem you have, the more your thinking clears out.
yeah.
It's
And
not
that's
so
why
selfish and self centered and
I
fear
love the
driven. And
cycle. And that's, it first starts, they have to take care of a horse.
mm-hmm.
And they haven't taken care of anything in a really long time besides themselves by the time they get to us. So I can care for an animal, that's safe, before I can start caring for humans. Like, I just did this group with them the other day where I said, with young people, pay attention to the second step, because it says our higher power will restore us to sanity. So we're not going to brainwash you. We're not going to make you a totally different person. We're going to get you back to who you were before all of this armor and these things became necessary for you. You get to set it all down. So that's how you break down the concept of surrender to them. There's relief in that. What does it feel like to not have to know how to do it? Just to say, I want to do it. I want to
Mm-hmm.
feel better. And then have all these other people come in and teach you. You don't have to know how to do it. You just have to know you're willing to do it.
Right.
So that's where I do think the 12 steps comes in, and for them, because most of them feel like they got here because they're bad kids. I've People say this, and I think sometimes they say it and it's overused and it sounds like BS, but I've never met a bad kid. Never met a bad kid. Met a kid that learned how to survive his life through making bad choices and built up a ton of armor. Never met a bad kid.
Right.
And
I
I've
get
worked
that.
with thousands of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we get to intervene before they get to you, where it's harder.
Yeah.
It's harder when they're adults and their brain is pretty set in and their life has had real consequences that you have to unravel. Uh, it's the other part for kids. Their consequences aren't as obvious. They haven't lost their career or their
Yeah.
wife or their kids. They got kicked out of school and they blame the school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So got kicked off their sports team and it's the coach's fault. So it's really teaching them where it was tied to, because then there's hope. Then okay, now I know how to fix it. So
Would you say there needs to be an overhaul of the public school system?
I do, and I feel sad about what is the solution, because it's big. That was why I couldn't work in it. Even back then, that was a long time ago. It was 20-something years ago. I worked in the special education department under a director that was calling the kids retards. And I'm like, she's my director, and this is a higher power thing, but I was just like, I can't work in a system where I'm young and they see me as young, and it would take years and years and years for things to be different. Uh, and I worked at United Cerebral Palsy Foundation just because the hours worked. It was respite. And then 10 years later, I had a daughter that was born with cerebral palsy. So it's like, why did I get that degree? What did I do with it? Oh, it taught me how to take care of my perfect baby and know how to help her.
Mm-hmm.
But the school system does need an overhaul, but it needs some unity of vision. And I think we're kind of really far away from being united in anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the scary part. So until then, it needs the helpers that are willing to go into the schools and help the kids. There are a couple of schools that let our guys go in and share their stories to seventh graders. And that happened when I was in seventh grade, and they brought in their guitars and they sang a song.
Right.
And I've never forgotten it. I'm like, they're such cool people.
Right.
Like, their stories are so cool. So I think, prevention, getting to them when they're early and young, to say, this is why you might pick up drugs one time and never set it down again without really big things happening in your life. So I think until the public school can change, it's just people that are willing to go into it and help. That's part of our foundation too, that we're starting to raise money to send kids to treatment. But it's also to, aimed at prevention and getting more helpers out there. That it's not our job to go into the public school and fix it. I feel like all kids are all of our jobs.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
especially once you become a parent to one. I'm like, I became a parent. I have thousands of kids, not
Yeah.
just my 3 kids.
Right.
I think we just all have this collective responsibility instead of sitting back and saying the school should fix it.
Yeah.
They don't have the resources. They don't have, so it's not the school's job. I think it's all of our jobs.
You know, there's this little selfish piece of why I do what I do when I do interventions. Is I want to see people have the same freedom that I have. Selfishly, I want the world to be a little better place for me to walk around in, for my kids to walk around
For
in, for
our
my
kids.
grandkids to walk around in.
Yes. When
You
we
know?
met, we would meet every week before we opened the academy, and we would start with the questions: what do we want to be, and what do we not want to be? Every meeting. And my dad would say, I want to be the place that changes the world. And I'm like, it's a little grandiose, Dad. It's like, we don't even have any kids in here yet. What are you talking about?
Right.
That's big. And he says, no, I want to help kids find themselves so they can go out and they can change the world and the ripple effect. And now, 21 years later, we have kids working in the government. We have so many social workers that are out there. We have kids raising their own kids in a totally different way. It's changed the world. And what I wanted to be was a lighthouse that no matter how dark it got, if I knew you 15 years ago, I just got a text from one of our original kids that he's expecting a baby girl. He already has a boy. And I remember sitting in session with him where he thought, nobody will ever love me. Nobody will ever love me. And now he's married with 2 kids. So it has. We are a lighthouse, and it has changed the world. And if more people felt, if we just worried about, instead of all these big problems in the world, and there's so many, I just water the garden that's in front of me.
Yeah.
And I teach my kids, you water the garden that's in front. My son is studying to be a doctor. That's amazing. He had a kidney disease when he was young, and he said, I want to be the kind of doctor I always hoped would walk into the room when I was sick. My other daughter wants to be a dance teacher, and my youngest one, my little empath, she works with horses. So you water your garden, you hope that garden grows and pollinates the other gardens. I think that's like where hope lies. Is there's big problems that are going to take years and big solutions, but we can only start where we can start.
Yeah.
This podcast, why do you do it? You get messages of hope out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Hopefully that hope spreads. Just think if we all just said, okay, I'm going to take this little part, every person, all of the bigger problems would go away.
Yeah.
But they just feel too big if we just sit back, and that's their problem, and they should do that different. In the school, we just have to get involved.
My motto, my company is, changing mankind one family at a time. And a buddy of mine, he said, it's rather bold, no? It's pretty bold. I'm like, the art of war says the odds favor the bold. But that's really what it is. That's what we're doing, is we're changing mankind one family at a time. I've known people that I've intervened on that have gone out and they've changed hundreds of people's lives.
Yes.
If you can assist in helping one person change, that's going to hit 10 people immediately.
And it's the only way. What's another way?
Yeah.
How are we going to change mass populations of people? And it's too big. So then nobody gets started. So absolutely. And then that family, somebody calls them because they heard their story and they're like, my son is, he's going to die. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here you go.
Yeah.
All these people, they'll help him. Yeah. And then he goes out. So the ripple effects, I think, of working in this industry is some of it we'll never know. Some of it we get to see, but it's thousands. And that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
I always tell the kids, look down at where your feet are pointed and do what's standing right in front of you.
Yeah.
And then the next thing will reveal itself.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's all we can do every day. So I'm proud to be building connections in this amongst the helpers.
Mm-hmm.
I think the helpers have to unite and say collectively, what can we all do?
Right.
To make a bigger difference and create more of those families. I think that's important, and it's happening more and more. Today, every time I get asked to be involved in something, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I will do that. I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but I know the more times I put myself out there, the more chance I have to make a difference. It's all we can do, I think. So.
Absolutely. Tiffany, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so
Appreciate you
much
coming
for
all this way. I know you were here anyway, but like I said, she came all this way to be on, just to be on,
That's a
just to
big
be
part
on
of
the
it. It
podcast.
was the
You
most
know
anxiety-provoking leg of my trip.
what, the
So,
podcast?
yes,
We're good.
it was easy.
It's easy.
I
See,
I
you
freaked
see.
out for no reason.
Yup. How much time did you squander away
I
worried about
know.
something that didn't need to
I
be
know.
worried with?
But you know what? I did something hard. You just built me up.
There you go.
A little
you go.
piece of self-esteem.
So if someone wants to get in touch with Inbalance Therapeutic Boarding School out in Arizona,
Yes.
who do they contact?
So they can contact me on our website. It's inbalancecontinuum.com. I'm excited. We're just launching a whole wellness clinic that's specifically for college-age kids in Tucson that is not focused on substance abuse. It's that kid that can't leave his college dorm room because he's too scared and he hasn't built up. So we're partnering with the University of Arizona to build that and just help kids not drop out of school because they're too scared. So we have our transitional living programs for adolescent, young adults, collegiate age, and then we have our academy for boys 13 to 17. But it's all on inbalancecontinuum.com.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thank you for making it easy.
Absolutely. That's it for the show, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And always remember, be good to yourselves.